So the Railjack update is finally here on console, and with it, it has brought 4 new weapons. Now, these weapons have a lot of different stats, a lot of different things, and if you are probably new to the game, you probably don't know what weapon is good, what weapon is not. So today we're gonna try to figure out what weapon is good, what weapon is okay, what weapon is probably you should not build. And yeah, let's just try to figure out what weapon is probably the best weapon that actually came out of this update. So yeah, let's actually look at all the weapons really quickly. So the 4 new weapons that came out are the Vort, which is like an automatic firing projectile type weapon. Then you have Glazio, which is the big damage weapon. It has like a lot of crit chance on it. But it's a little like slower fire rate. But if you have the ZT version, you have a little bit more fire rate on it. And then you have Talon, which is like a hit scan type weapon, so there's no drop off on it, but it is like a rapid fire weapon, so kind of like a Carcinox type deal. But it's kind of like a Carcinox, but without the damage or like the bullet drop off. And then you have Laith, which is kind of similar to Glazio in a way, but it's a little faster at firing it, but it also has a projectile. So yeah, these are the 4 new weapons. So let's actually check out Vort at first to see and how it actually performs. So Vort is a projectile type weapon, and it is kind of like an automatic firing type deal. The thing that I can kind of relate to this thing is kind of like the ZT APOC, but it doesn't have the amount of crit chance that the ZT APOC has though. Like the crit is a lot lower on the ZT version, definitely. So it's a decent weapon to use. I'm not gonna lie. Like this is the one that I've been using a lot, because just the other weapons don't have like enough damage, I want to say, and also just aren't even fun enough to kind of play around with. But Vort seems to be like the perfect balance between fire rate and just damage also. And it does electricity damage, so it only does one element, which is not you would want to have other elements in there, but it's not a bad weapon. And also, I gotta say, one of the things with all these weapons is the heat acceleration is a little bit too much, or like heat accretion, I think, is a bit too much on these. So you would want to fire a little slowly so that you don't actually run out of ammo on these things. But yeah, that's basically it. I think that's everything there's to talk about with the Vort. The next weapon is Talyn now, or Talon, something like that. Now this weapon is also, as I said, it's kind of like the Carcinox, where it has a lot of fire rate, and also, as I said, the heat accretion is a little bit too much, where you can't fire it out that fast. And also, like higher levels, as you can see, it's not doing bad, but it's not doing that great. Like the damage isn't that great. I think it has a little, not that much crit either. I think this is like more of a status type weapon, which is which isn't bad, but like on Railjack you would want to have, to be honest, a bit more crit. But it is an interesting weapon. It doesn't have any bullet drop off, so you could just basically shoot at the fighters and shit, and you don't have to worry about like firing ahead of them, kind of like you do with other weapons. But it's an interesting weapon. Would I recommend it? Probably not. I don't think a lot of people will be using this. It's just like a kind of a gimmicky weapon. It doesn't have a lot of damage. If it had a little bit more damage, or maybe a bit more crit on there, I think it would be pretty decent. But as it is, probably I would say just skip this one, just because it's not really worth building, in my opinion. So yeah, that's the Talon. The third weapon is Laith. Now Laith is an interesting weapon too. It's kind of similar in like damage with the Glazio, where Glazio actually does a little bit more damage, but it has less fire rate. This is kind of like that too, and again, the heat accretion is just a bit too much, where you can't like fire it that fast, and the damage is pretty good. This has a lot of damage. It is also another projectile weapon, which projectile weapons are a little bit hard to aim, especially with a controller. But it's not a bad weapon. It definitely has its uses. It's not going to be like something that's fun to use, but if you just want like a lot of high damage weapon, it's probably not that bad. And yeah, so that's basically, I think, Lathe. Fourth and final weapon, which I think is probably the best weapon in this update, is Glazio. Now, Glazio has a lot of crit chance and a lot of damage, but it does have one thing that is, not that great, which is its fire rate. It's not that high of a fire rate, but it does do very big damage numbers. Now, if I had to like compare it to something else, it's kind of like a version of a cryophon. Cryophon does a lot of damage up close. This is basically like a ranged version of a cryophon. So it's not bad, does a lot of damage. I think it's still pretty projectile type deal, and it's also like very good to play around with a little bit. But honestly, I have given this to my crewmates, to my gunners, and they actually do a lot of damage with this weapon. So this is definitely a weapon that I would say you would want to build for your crewmates or for your gunners or whatever you are running. At least if you have one gunner on your crew, this is definitely you want to run, because the AI is very good at aiming this thing and really doing a lot of damage with it. So yeah, this is very good for like your crewmates, your gunners, because they can actually do a lot of damage with this, and they can be like pretty accurate if you actually keep the ship a little steady. They can actually do a lot of damage with it. So yeah, I think Glazio is probably the best weapon that came out of this. So that's basically all the 4 weapons. So as I said, I think I prefer the Vort and the Glazio. Vort being the one that I use myself, and Glazio the one that I give to my crewmates so they can take care of fighters that I can't really angle that well. And you can also give your crewmate like the Lathe. The Lathe also does pretty decent too if you want to give them that. Lathe is just going to be like a little bit more fire rate but a little less damage on there. So that's basically your choice. If you want a bit more fire rate and a little bit less damage, you can give them Lathe. But if you want a bit more damage on there, yeah, I would say just run Glazio on your secondary turrets and give that to your gunners, and they'll be pretty good with this. So yeah, that's basically all the 4 weapons. I would say consensus, I would say you can try Vort. I think a lot of people are not going to build all these weapons because they aren't that special and they don't do a lot of damage. The only weapon that I think, if you want to really get one, I think Glazio is probably the best, and that's just for like your crewmates, so they can do like a lot of damage. And because that just has like insane amount, like 75% crit after you have all the predator mods and shit, so it's really good. And I would say if you want to try out one weapon, like a corpus, one of the weapons, I think you should just try out the Vort. It's not bad. It's an automatic. It's kind of has projectiles, but it's manageable. The heat accretion is a little bit too much on there on all these weapons, but if you can manage it, it should be good. The Talon is a very specific type weapon, and it doesn't have a lot of damage on there, so I would probably say just skip that one. And Laith, you can also build Laith, but it's just like if you want to build Glazio or Laith, that's just basically your choice. If you want to use Laith, you can use that too. So yeah, those are all the new 4 weapons in Railjack. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and yeah, that's it. I will see you in another video.